future of JavaScript. Thank you. Thank you. So, as Kevin already said, I'm going to be talking about the future of JavaScript, specifically ECMAScript 2015, ECMAScript 6, ECMA 2015, whatever you want to call it. It's the new JavaScript. To reiterate everything Kevin just said, I'm a passionate front-end developer here at Cardinal. I went to school for multimedia and web design. I was a designer for a while. I went into back-end development and found my niche in front-end development. I'm from Cincinnati, huge Bengals fan. That's what's up. I'm also dealing with bronchitis, so I preemptively apologize for my throat clearing and or passing out. I'll be sure to cough in the mic so I blow out Kevin's eardrums. So in order to talk about the future, let's talk about the history. In May of 1995, Brendan Eich created what was then known as Mocha. It was created in 10 days, allegedly, a little bit skeptical, whatever. It was then beta released in Netscape Navigator, and they called it LiveScript. And then in December, they changed it from LiveScript to JavaScript. And then here comes IE in August of 1996, and they clone it and they call it JScript. So in 1996, 1997, ECMA starts writing standards around JavaScript. And in 1999, they release ES3, which is kind of the modern JS baseline. That is really bright. And that's just how JavaScript functions and how we're used to using it now. So it had a troublesome past. 2000 to 2007, they tried twice to release ES4. It inevitably was abandoned in 2008. They were trying to do too much too quick. Developers weren't getting behind it, and browsers weren't really embracing it too much. And then ES5, they added all the cool features we're used to. This is the JavaScript we know and love. Use strict, JSON, object crate, all kinds of different features. I can't really go through them all. So I'm throwing around a lot of acronyms. What do they mean? So ECMAScript 2015 was called ECMAScript 6. It's now technically ECMAScript 2015. I'm probably going to call it everything throughout this whole presentation. So JavaScript is the implementation, it's the actual code, whereas ECMAScript is the specifications, and ECMAScript 2015 is the next standard, the next big thing. Why? Why all this updating? So JavaScript is used a lot more than what it's intended for. We're using it for web servers, we're using it for task automation like Grunt or Gulp. Think of Node, it's huge, it's not what JavaScript was meant for at all. There's a good chance it's going to become a dominant language if you don't already consider it already. It's available on so many devices. There's quadcopters that run JavaScript. I know they even have a COBOL wrapper for COBOL that's wrapped in JavaScript. Nobody uses COBOL anymore. Coding has changed, so let's accommodate it. Coding feels kind of old to us. It's almost a different language. And instead, why don't they adapt the language to communicate the way that humans communicate? So who's developing this? A standards body. The ECMA, specifically the TC39 team, they're in charge of all the standards around JavaScript. Inside of that, there's a lot of major browser developers, Chrome, Firefox, IE. They also have guest experts come in, a lot of usability guys, everything from usability guys to even Java guys are all involved in it. Google has a huge hand in it and a lot of money, and Gandalf, he's also involved in it. So they also move very slow. Brendan and I kind of said it best. Why the long freeze in JavaScript development? A lot of it had to do with the long freeze on browsers due to IE, surprise. So aside from that, they're also just a very slow organization. They just started using GitHub in 2011. GitHub's been around a lot longer than that, and they're just slow moving. I get it, they have a lot to accommodate. They got to think about all of us, what do we want? And that's hard to do. Can I use it yet? Yes, no, kind of, but not really. I wouldn't bother. Some browsers already use ES6 features, and I have Chrome, but now IE Edge actually they're the farthest ahead, believe it or not. And I'll show a chart later of who's embraced it already, who's working on it. In Chrome, you have to actually enable experimental JavaScript, but there's now JavaScript libraries that'll compile ES6 back to ES5, so your web app is completely compatible. Babel is also another one of those. You can also come up with gulp or grunt tasks that'll compile it. They call it transpiling, which compiles it backwards. CodePen is Babel now, so you can actually go in and start messing with ES6, play around. That's really the best way to learn it. That's how I started out learning it. And here's a very important graph. Make sure you get all the information here. The purpose of this is to notice all the red versus green. The red is they haven't supported it yet, and the green is they have. And this is everything from web hosting to different browsers, mobile and desktop, and even some like compilers are listed in there. And you can see there's a lot for each one of those to accommodate, and they're striving towards it, and they're actually moving surprisingly quick. It's kind of impressive how fast they're moving. So what's new in ES6 or ECMAScript 2015? Like I said, I'm going to use them all the terms. All this stuff. I'm not going to go through each one. It's actually more than I could ever fit in this presentation, and Kevin said we didn't have enough pillows because you guys would fall asleep. So what I did is I actually went through and I picked out the features that I thought were most useful, things that I found interesting, and things I see other front-end developers running into a lot. So number one, contains. I actually get excited about this. Index of, I hate it. It's the most overused and outdated thing in JS. In this specific example, we have ABC, and we're trying to search for if it has B. And we have to do this. Dot index of B is greater than -1. Like greater than -1, that's not how humans communicate. It doesn't make any sense. Now we have this. So we have ABC dot contains B. Yes, it does. It's straightforward. Thank God. We also have errors. Errors are cool. I think they're a little bit weird, but they will cut down on the amount of code. Previously, we had to define a function. We had to designate the x parameter and then do whatever you wanted to do, whatever math or whatever. Now we can just do x, arrow, and then the return is x times x. Really short. It's going to eliminate some code. I did find it a little weird that if you don't have a parameter, use empty parens. Just seems weird. I think I'll get used to it with time. Block bindings. This is kind of new. Anyway, this is the let feature. It's like var. You're declaring a variable, but it's restricted to the block, and it cannot be used until after its declaration. So it's easier to explain this visually. Like here, we have the function let test, and right out of the box, we're telling it that x equals 31. And then we have this if statement. If whatever is true, now it's 71. So when we spit out the x variable, it's going to be 71. But the second we leave this block, it's back to 31. It's kind of a new way of handling variables. I think it's pretty cool. Should be pretty useful. We also have a const variable. It's pretty straightforward, constant. It's similar to let, same block scoping. And once it's declared, it cannot be changed. A good example of this, like say pi is something you'd never change. You can use it to calculate circumference, and you know you're not ever going to change pi, so that's a good example of when to use it. Destructured assignment. This is cool, and I think it'll have a lot of use with like JavaScript databases, which are gaining speed pretty quick. You can have several variables initialized in a single statement. Here we're defining DMY, day, month, year, and we're putting in those values, 13.2 and 1963. So here you have your keys, and here you have your values. And we can actually change the order of these by using the keys, because this is America. We don't do it that way. So we switch it up, and we're not actually changing the values. We're just moving them around to the right spot. This also works with objects. So here we have the function today. We're returning all of these assets, and we can actually set like M to month and Y to year, and then send it back to the object, and it'll spit out month equals 2, year equals 1963. Again, I think this will have a lot of use with big data websites, and I think like some of the JavaScript databases, some of their behind the screens, scripting is going to take advantage of this big. So parameters, changing up a little bit. We have default parameters now, which I think is awesome. Eliminates a lot of code that I do every day. You can assign a default value to function params, and it's used if a parameter is not formally passed. So the way we used to do it, you'd have your function, and you have your parameters here, and then you had to go through for each one. If y doesn't have a value, then it's 7. If z doesn't have a value, it's 42. If you have 32 params, you have to do that for each one of them. It's a pain. So what you can do is you can actually set this up so it has a default param, So if you're not getting a value from that function that you're calling, it's going to take that. Kind of handy. We also have REST parameters now, and this replaces the use of arguments. Before, if you got an unexpected param, you just set up an argument, try to figure out what you were going to do with it. It's a name param. It becomes an array containing the rest of the params. So basically, in simple terms, it's a catch-all. If I call the sum function and I give it like a 1 for first and a 2 for second, and then I have 32 numbers after that, it doesn't know what to do with it. And this is going to catch everything else. From there, I'm able to count how many it actually caught and spit that out. Yeah, you could. Okay. So spread, it's the opposite of REST, and it splits an array into individual params. So here we have an array, A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to do the math.max function, and it's actually just going to spit out 5, one individual, what's the word, value, I guess. Kind of handy, because before when you would do this, you'd get NaN. I'm not even sure what exactly that means, and it's not helpful. Not a number, is that what it is? I've always wondered that. I would just stare at it like, what is that? That's not helpful. Now I don't even have to bother with it. Iterators. So these are really cool. They're an object that has a next method built into it. It returns a value, and then it's done. So here we set up an array, 1, 2, 3, and we can use the for loop to actually loop through that. And here we're spitting out the entries, which is going to spit out the index and then the value. And it's going to first do 1, and then 2, and then 3. And then you can just spit out the values and the keys. And since we're using a for loop, it's actually going to loop through those, and it's going to spit out each one at a time, and not all in one string. So for of, this is the new JavaScript power that we have to work with iterable objects. That's really, I think, all that it's used for. So here we're using the for loop, and we're letting I of which 1, 2, and 3. And the for loop is going to set each one to I, and then we're going to spit out I. So again, it's going to spit out 1, 2, and then 3. Not all at the same time, but it's 3 separate statements. Generators. So you add an asterisk after a function now, and I'll show an example of this. And it also has a new keyword, yield, which is built in. And it's used to specify values that iterator should return when next is called. And it stops execution. It puts it in memory where it stopped, so it knows where to continue next time you call next. A lot of nexts in there. So anyway, function, take notice to the asterisk after function. And we have yield 1, yield 2, yield 3. And then we're just going to set up a variable with that function. And we're going to let I of it, which goes back to the function. And it's going to spit that out, 1, 2, and 3, because we're using the for loop. But here you can actually call next, and it's going to spit out the index. And then there's a done, which will be true or false. It's a Boolean. So when you hit the end of the yield, it's actually going to tell you you're done here. So I can go to IT2 next, and I'm going to get 0 first. an error if it didn't. And you're using the then function to call that, and you can send the result, and you can do whatever calculations you want to do here. That way, you have this reusable promise that you can call in multiple situations. So proxies, I'm not sure how I will use this yet, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. You can create an object through another object. So an example of how to use this, you're setting up, like we have the target and handler variables, and inside of the handler we have the function as a get. It's expecting receiver name, it's going to return hello name. And we're going to set up the var p with new proxy, and we're going to spit back the target and the handler. So when we call p.world, we're spitting back the world, and it's in turn going to come back to hello world. So you're passing this in, and you're setting the variable to world. Kind of cool. Not sure how I would use it yet. Still neat. Anyway, questions? Do we have time for questions? I should have asked. 2? I answered all of them.
Has anybody done any tests for impact on performance? You can't abstract things to a language without paying the price for it.
Yeah, well, what they're doing is they are reusing a lot of existing components in ES5. Really, not to discredit what they've done, but you can do all of this currently. So it doesn't affect performance too much, and with browsers moving forward, they're embracing this, so nothing's really changing. That makes sense. Fight.
One of your first slides, you had the grid from Can I Use?
No, it's not Can I Use. It's a lot like it. Okay. It's actually I forget his name, but he published it to GitHub.
Okay. Well, I've done a presentation on ES6, and Babel is the most accepted or most widely
embraced. Yeah.
You get all the cutting edge stuff with backwards compatibility with Babel. It is the best way to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I want to say they said they're like 99.8% there or something, and the other 0.2%.
It makes it super easy to get on the ES6 journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you.
I have a question about the arrow functions. I was wondering, can they be multi-line?
Well, which functions?
The arrow functions?
Arrow.
Like when you're defining a function using an arrow notation?
Yeah, you could do multi-line. Like if you know typically, well, I shouldn't say typically, but I know I do like function X and then I enter down and there's my big code block. You can do the same thing with arrows.
Okay. Is it indentation-based? Like how does it know when to end the function? I guess is what we're asking.
That's a good question. It might be the semicolon that ends it. I wish I would have played with that. I don't know. What else? We good? Thank you.